I think the first thing that I noticed about him was how much he loved Jordan, and him and Jordan were kind of attached at the hip when I first met them. He just loved his brother.
He was my best snowboard buddy. Skateboard together, and as kids we'd get dropped off at the skate park in the early morning and hang out till the very end of the day. It wasn't just good enough to climb up a hill, but we had to find the biggest tree on that hill and climb up to the top of that and then almost get stuck or almost fall down. But it had to be kind of extreme or have some risk to it, or it was boring to us. It wasn't as fun.
He could just kind of leave the city, leave all of his worries behind, go be out in nature. It made me feel so carefree when I was with him.
A lot of our time spent together was actually in the dog park.
It was just the softest I would ever see my brother, is when he was with his little dogs or my little dog. He was the messiest person I've ever met in my entire life, hands down.
Yeah, the kitchen, just wow, unbelievable.
But he could always come out of his bedroom, no matter what state it was in, looking just perfect. His hair done, his shirt pressed, and it was just mind-boggling how that could possibly happen.
I think what made him a good stockbroker is that he was really good with people.
He couldn't sleep some nights because he knew that people's lives would be affected by the stock market, and that was really hard for him to deal with.
Growing up, I was actually homeschooled from grade 1 to 9. My adopted parents, John and Pam, they adopted 7 children. They homeschooled all of us. They were very rigid in their mentality. There's a certain standard of what was acceptable and what you were expected to be. And if you fell short of those standards, then you're not worthy, you're not valuable, and even worse, you deserve punishment for that. And so it was actually a very traumatic experience for myself, being First Nations, born in Saskatchewan, and also having a father who's from Ethiopia, really having my whole identity being washed out through the adoption process, the foster care system, and realistically the almost residential schooling lifestyle that John and Pam had ingrained in their home. Music actually really helped me through that space of my life, being 15, 16, being a little awkward. I always asked John and Pam, I said, look, I'd really love to play the guitar. And they're like, no, you can't play the guitar until you get to this certain level of piano. And I was just like, fine, buy me a guitar and I'll teach myself. We were all going out to just smoke marijuana, skip lunch, who knows, just whatever we were doing in high school. And so he comes up to me and he's just like, Alec, I don't have any marijuana or cannabis. And I was just like, oh, okay. And he's like, but I have this, it's beans or it's fentanyl. And I was just like, okay, I'm open to trying this. And so I tried it. And honestly, at that moment, I felt like that was almost the beginning of me becoming enslaved. After I experienced the first the rush or the high or the feeling from these substances, a part of my brain just told me oh, why have you wasted your time with other things and this when this feels so good?
When we were in grade 9, 10, we were doing a lot of drugs together, kind of recreationally for fun. I was actually with my wife now. We were on and off, how junior high relationships are. I sent her a big long message saying I really love you and, here's what I've been doing and this is all the stuff I've been getting up to. And she saw that and she's like, holy bye. So, we broke up. And then to me, that was a big wake up call and kind of got away from that stuff. And I could tell he didn't as much. But at that age, we're so young, I didn't know it was gonna grow into this big addiction and become everything that it ended up being. I got really lucky. It could have so easily been in the same boat as Jamie was.
I mean, I never knew anything was wrong. I'm not gonna lie, I did find prescription pill bottles, but I didn't really think a lot of it because he always just seemed so okay.
He did injure his back and was prescribed Percocet or opioids. That's where it began. I found a prescription bottle of pills that did not belong to him.
I broke my ankle and I had Percocet. One day I woke up and they were gone. And I mean, we were out at the bar that night, so I was like, oh, maybe I lost them. And I was like, I'm gonna go back and see if they're at this bar, because like my ankle's hurting. And I know he was like, no, don't go back there. He's like, they're not gonna be there. He's like, someone would have picked them up. And well, let's try, let's go look at it. And he came with me, and you know, thinking back now, he's telling me not to go back there because he's the one who took them. And kind of after that, I started to realize, you know, these aren't coincidences. This is him, you know, trying to get these drugs in any way he can and covering it up so that, you know, he doesn't have to deal with the shame and the guilt. Because the Jamie that I grew up with, he wouldn't do something like that to me because, you know, we're brothers, right? We're twins.
I went down immediately this really dark place of how he's ruined our lives. We're taught to turn our backs on people and this tough love, idea, and it's not natural, and it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel right, but you keep telling yourself you're doing the right thing. I really shamed him. Maybe, I don't think it would have changed maybe anything, maybe it would have, but that moment, I wish I could take it back.
In a relationship with someone with addiction, they don't want to cause any more damage than they've already done, so they're gonna tell you things that are gonna make you happy no matter if it's a lie or not. And we had gone through so much together, I just didn't understand why he was lying to me in the first place. I knew like everything about him, you know? So there was nothing he could say that would make me love him any less.
I do think he tried. He wanted to get better, and I think that's such a heartbreaking situation when someone wants it, but there's just no path to be able to access it.
Like, especially whenever he would relapse again, he felt like a huge amount of shame and guilt.
He did a really good job of kind of separating us, because if we had talked, then maybe we all would have known what was going on.
He didn't feel he could tell anyone what was happening. Somebody could have explained harm reduction to us, could have explained to us what it meant to be addicted to opioids and how these fundamental changes were happening in his brain and how sick he was going to get when he was trying to come off and how that natural survival mechanism in the brain would kick in to alleviate that pain. We had zero understanding, so it made it impossible for us to understand Nathan.
Every single time he relapsed, it was just like that feeling, like in the pit of your stomach. Here we go again.
That cycle is just, you know, it's exhausting. He broke his scaphoid. I think with skateboarding was the initial break. He'd get a surgery and it was a small bone that doesn't always heal properly, so he had multiple surgeries on it. He'd find out his bone's not healing and you need another surgery in 6 months, and then give him some opiates and send him home with some Percocets, and then that just immediate trigger. Like, you know, no addict is gonna be like, okay, I'm just gonna take this one bottle of pills and then I'm gonna go back to being sober. Like, it's near impossible, I would say.
The most trauma he was dealing with was things he had done in the heat of his addiction. He had been doing drugs for days. He was in a little bit of a psychosis and he felt the need to leave the house immediately. He found the nearest car and just started driving. The police inevitably found him. If anyone is doing things when they're in a psychosis, it shouldn't be met with criminalization. I think it should be met with some mental health supports.
The biggest misconception that I see is that folks that are struggling with substance use disorder are in control of their own behaviors. People seriously think that somebody whose brain chemicals are way off believe that they're in control and they're choosing to go back and recreate this vicious cycle of addiction in their own lives, regardless of the pain. No, that's not how it works.
The scariest thing is when he would barely come to after overdosing, and then they would send him out. It was basically just, okay, bye, and he hadn't even got his wits about him yet. We would try and get him into a detox, and it would be full, and he'd have nowhere to go.
I remember like being sick from withdrawal, like pretty much on a weekly basis. I remember like turning to some crime and just like turning to other ways of like trying to make money to be able to buy more fentanyl. And like I was headed down a really, really dark path. That window of me thinking that things were gonna be okay and then me making a decision that I knew I would regret was slowly becoming shorter and shorter and shorter.
Went to Canmore and we kind of walked like by the river and we just like took pictures. We were just kind of being silly. And he was being really loving that day too. Like weirdly, like loving. But then that night gave him a call. We were supposed to hang out the next day. He was like, I don't know, I think I'm gonna relapse tonight. And so I was just really frustrated. I just kind of hung up the phone, and then the next morning at 11 a.m. I got the call that he had passed away.
So the final cause of death was found to be carfentanil, fentanyl, bupropion, and alprazolam toxicity, and the manner of death being accidental.
I guess my regret would be that I wasn't there. I mean, just so he knew that I still loved him. You know, had I known everything I do now, I would have known that, no, this is gonna be hard no matter what, but that the one thing that I can do is still love my brother. And I just, at that time, I just couldn't.
At his celebration of life, his family members got up and spoke about substance use. And they spoke openly and honestly. It allowed me to accept that that's what had happened, that was not a shameful way to die. It wasn't Nathan's fault. He deserved better. And I think that honesty in that moment, it felt like a relief.
I ended up being the impromptu MC, and I think I did a really good job.
You did.
So I was strong and I did what I needed to do, and then I was a puddle on the floor. I have never cried so hard in my life. I was having troubles breathing normally, and the person who came to my rescue was Rosalind. She sat with me and let me sob and then helped me get my breath back. And she stared at me in the eyes and said, "You're gonna be okay."
When I initially decided to stop using fentanyl, I was pretty heavily involved in 12-step programs and like understanding that ideology about like what it meant to like be sober. As I grew farther along in my own life, I really started to understand how vaguely familiar this whole narrative of like controlling someone's actions through fear was. The idea of hell and the idea that if you don't act in this way, this is gonna happen and you're gonna be eternally damned. I didn't wanna keep myself in a like, fear-bound constraint. And so I remember reading an elder's words once, "What does recovery/sobriety mean?" And he says, "Being on a journey of self-love." I really believe that hunting is ceremony. And I really believe that life is ceremony. This one thought and this one voice was just in my mind, and it just reaffirmed to me this idea that I wouldn't fail.
We wanted to do something to end stigma, that we wanted people to be able to talk about addiction, that it shouldn't be something that we're considering shameful, that it is something that it happens to so many people. We just don't talk about it.
If we collectively change our perception of addiction and we see the person first, we will remove the mask of shame that so often prevents people from getting the help that they need and the help that they deserve.
The one thing that I do want to say about the Alberta Foundation for Changing the Face of Addiction and working with Jessica and Rosalind was that it was profoundly life-changing for me. They always ensured that not only did I have a space at the table, but I had a voice at the table.
See me. There is hope. We can do this together.
You step back and you think, how can you not want to give these people a chance, right? Every other condition, we try to make that happen. Why is it this one that we have such a distorted perception on, that we stop seeing the human being?
I feel like every single time I see someone on the street, it just reminds me of him, and I just remember that they have a family. They might even have a girlfriend that, like, loves them so much, and everyone's just a person, and they need help just like any other person, regardless of their story, regardless of what they've done. It's really important to just remember that, and now it's kind of like what I want to do with my life. I'm currently enrolled in addiction studies. I just want to like go in there and just like be that person that like someone needs.
The Jamie Blaine Memorial Fund of the Bankton Style was end of the year competition. Give back to the snowboard community, because that's what Jamie really loved. You know, in the snowboard community, they might not talk about it that much, but it lives everywhere, addiction and mental health issues. So we want to be that person that says, you know, have fun, we're giving back, but here are some resources if you need help with anything. You know, I think Jamie would be honored too to see something like that. I could see him saying kind of like, what the f***, like this is all for me. But I mean, he would also be stoked on it. So yeah, it makes me happy.
Because of his love of animals, I really think that he would have been an amazing veterinarian.
I think he would have made a great professor, is what I think he would have done really well.
Professor of?
I don't know, wouldn't matter. He would just like debating with all the students.
I wish he had done things he wanted to do. I don't even know what some of his passions were.
I love salsa dancing. It really felt like a culmination of like almost all things music. And the other thing too that I love about salsa dancing is the folks who you're dancing with. It's a very intimate encounter, and sometimes when you dance with a complete stranger, it gives a level of like fluidity to life. You're executing these movements, and then it's just like you finish as soon as the drum just like strikes the last beat. Boom, there's a dip. And then your mind is just blown.
Jamie has taught me to be such a more caring, empathetic person, and he was so funny, and he just like taught me just to, when things get tough, like you can always just find something to laugh at, you know?
I want to sit here and own my grief. I want to remember him, the good and the bad. I don't need someone to tell me everything's going to be okay. I don't need someone to tell me they're sorry for my loss. I want someone to say, "What was your brother like?" That's what I want.